Diane's voice cut through the VFW meeting room like a paper slice. "Who are you really?" she asked loud enough that the old coffee urn stopped gurgling and the men near the dartboard turned around. Sean Mercer stood beside her red-faced collar damp, staring at me like I'd pulled a weapon instead of a manila folder. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I slid one sheet across the folding table. My name sat at the bottom in black ink, stamped and dated, the kind of signature banks treat like gospel. A chair scraped back. A plastic cup clinked. Someone whispered, "No way." The room made that sound a crowd makes when it realizes the story it's been hearing wasn't the real one. Diane's lips parted. Sean's mouth opened, then shut. His hands clenched like he wanted to crush paper into dust. And all I could hear was Diane's voice from the night before, under warm restaurant lights, saying the words that started everything. "Family only. I live in Peoria, Illinois. I'm 56. My name is Gary Whitaker. I did Navy supply work in my 20s, logistics ever since. The kind of job nobody notices until something stops moving. In a town like this, people don't ask what you do for a living as much as they watch how you live. They notice your truck, your handshake, whether you pay your bills on time. They know I do. The night it started, I was standing outside the Riverfront Grill on Water Street, looking through the glass at my wife Diane, laughing with her ex-husband like I was already gone. Inside, the lights were low. Jazz hummed soft under the clink of silverware. The air smelled like steak and butter. Diane had dressed up, not for me, for that table. Her lipstick was fresh. Her hair was pinned the way she used to wear it on anniversaries back when effort still felt mutual. Standing there, I realized she hadn't done that for me in a long time. We went in together. The hostess led us back. Sean was already seated, one arm draped around Caleb, his son, my stepson, who was turning 18. Caleb gave me a small nod. Not rude. Careful. The look kids get when they can feel adults lying and don't know where to put their eyes. We sat. Sean talked big, tossing out old glory stories and shiny new plans, expensive-sounding words that never came with receipts. Diane laughed too easily. I kept my voice normal and asked Caleb about school, about the truck he'd been saving for. He answered politely, eyes dropping to his plate. The waiter poured water. Sean ordered wine without looking at the price. Diane nodded like she approved. I watched her hand land on Sean's forearm when she laughed like it belonged there. Halfway through dinner, Diane leaned toward me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Gary," she said softly, like she was doing me a favor. "This is just family tonight." For a second, I thought I'd misheard her over the music. "I'm your husband," I said. She glanced at Sean like he was the guest of honor. "Caleb's dad is here. We're doing it like we used to." Sean leaned back, satisfied. Caleb stared at the tablecloth, jaw tight. I felt heat rise in my neck. Anger, shame, disbelief, all tangled together. I could have made a scene. I could have begged. Instead, I heard my father's old voice in my head, the one that carried me through boot camp and long nights overseas. You don't argue for a seat at a table that's already been cleared. So I nodded once. "I understand," I said. The words tasted like pennies. I set my napkin down and stood. My chair scraped louder than I meant it to. As I stepped away, the waiter, young kid trying to stay professional, slid my chair closer to the table like he was clearing space. That small motion hit harder than Diane's sentence, watching my place get erased without anyone asking. Diane didn't look up. She'd already turned back to Sean. The conversation rolled on without me like I'd been background noise the whole time. I walked out into the cold. The river air slapped my face. Headlights smeared across wet pavement. Somewhere behind me, laughter rose and fell, muffled by glass. My phone buzzed. Diane calling. I watched it ring until it stopped. A minute later, a text appeared. "Where did you go?" Like she hadn't just pushed me out the door. I drove home past Casey's bright sign humming against the dark, then past the credit union branch where I'd signed papers more times than I could count. My hand stayed steady on the wheel, but my chest felt hollow. At a red light, a memory flashed years ago at a VFW fish fry, Diane laughing at one of my dumb jokes, touching my elbow like she was proud to be seen with me. Back then, being chosen felt like winning. That night, I pulled into my driveway and sat in the car, engine ticking, heater blowing lukewarm air. The house looked the same. I didn't. I went straight to my small home office, opened the filing cabinet, and pulled out a black folder I hadn't touched in a long time. Contingencies. I sat down, flipped it open, and turned to the first page. Loan agreement. Cosigner Gary Whitaker. Attachments followed. Renewal dates. Guarantor language. Clean copies of what my name had been quietly holding up for years. I stared at my own name until it stopped feeling like a name and started feeling like leverage. Outside, the wind pushed against the siding. Inside, the house stayed quiet. And for the first time in a long time, I stopped feeling afraid of the silence. Morning came the same way it always had since my Navy days, early quiet, and without asking how I felt. At 5:30, I was already standing in the kitchen while the coffee maker clicked and hissed its way toward something drinkable. Outside, Peoria was still dark. No traffic, no voices. Just that thin blue-gray light that shows up before the sun decides whether it's going to commit or not. That was always my favorite part of the day. Nobody needed anything yet. I poured the coffee black and leaned against the counter. The house smelled like old wood and yesterday. Diane's side of the sink was empty. No lipstick ring on a mug, no hairpins scattered near the window, just space. I checked my phone. 2 missed calls from Diane, a couple of messages. "Are you coming home? We need to talk." I didn't open them right away. I set the phone face down and listened to the refrigerator hum. That sound had been in this house longer than most of our arguments. It felt permanent, reliable. Some habits stick with you no matter how much life changes. I'd learned that in the Navy. Wake up early, make your bed, handle what's in front of you before it handles you. I still live that way even after uniforms turned into flannel shirts and boots replaced steel toes. I got dressed slowly, jeans, flannel boots by the door. I checked my watch without thinking about it. Still accurate, still dependable. People hear logistics operations and their eyes glaze over. They picture warehouses, spreadsheets, forklifts. What it really is, though, is understanding how things lean on each other, who signs what happens when one small piece disappears. I'd spent years being the piece nobody talked about. Diane used to tease me for it. You worry about boring stuff, she'd say, waving a hand like details were gnats. Bills paid early, insurance renewed on time, forms filled out carefully, signatures neat and legible. She called it Gary stuff. I let her. I sat at the kitchen table and opened my laptop. I wasn't looking for revenge. That word implies heat. This was colder than that, more deliberate. Before I did anything else, I sent Diane a short text. "Hope Caleb had a good night. I'm turning in early." It wasn't a lie. It just wasn't the whole truth. She replied with a thumbs up a few minutes later. That told me everything I needed to know. I closed the messages and started where I always did. Facts, accounts, documents, names, dates. Most of our finances were joint, but the paperwork told a more honest story than conversations ever had. My name appeared more often than Diane realized. Then there was Sean. 2 years earlier, he'd come around talking about starting fresh. Needed a little help, nothing dramatic, just a loan to get his feet under him. Diane had asked me to come to the credit union for support. Rita Henson had slid the papers across the desk pen ready. Just a formality, she'd said. Your credit makes this smoother. Sean had clapped me on the shoulder like we were buddies. Diane had looked relieved like I'd saved the day. I signed because at the time it felt easier than pushing back, because family was supposed to mean something. I pulled the file up on my screen. There it was. My name in clean black letters, guarantor, renewal clause every 12 months, no renewal, no continuation, no drama, just policy. I didn't make any calls, I didn't cancel anything, I just noted the date. Next was the reference letter. Sean's job at that regional supply firm, the one he liked to brag about when he'd had a couple beers. I'd written that letter. Diane had asked me to. I remembered hesitating, then telling myself it was the decent thing to do. The letter required an annual update, standard procedure. I checked the calendar. Update due next week. I leaned back and closed my eyes for a moment. Caleb's face drifted into my mind. 18 now, taller than me by a couple of inches, still had that look when he was thinking hard, jaw set, just like his mother's. I remembered teaching him to drive along the river road, my hand hovering near the wheel, never touching it unless he really needed it. He hadn't asked for any of this. That was the moment doubt showed up, like it always does when you finally stop being useful. I asked myself if I was hurting the wrong person. The answer wasn't clean, but it was honest. I wasn't pulling strings. I was letting go of them. Systems don't fail because someone gets angry. They fail because support disappears and reality takes over. That isn't punishment. That's gravity. Around 9, Diane called again. I watched the phone buzz against the table. Each vibration felt louder than the last. When it stopped, the kitchen went quiet again. I thought about answering, about explaining. But explanations invite arguments, and arguments turn facts into feelings. Facts stand on their own. Later that morning, I drove into town not to stir anything up, just to move. I stopped at Casey's for coffee. Same cashier, same nod. In a town like this, consistency counts more than charm. As I walked back to my truck, my phone rang. Gary Rita said, calm as ever. We need to review some guarantor paperwork when you have a minute. Routine stuff. Routine. That word again. I told her I'd call her back. On the drive home, I passed the Illinois River, gray and steady flowing, whether anyone paid attention or not. That's when it settled in. I wasn't choosing cruelty over kindness. I was choosing honesty over convenience. Diane wanted family only. Sean wanted benefits without responsibility, and I had been the quiet bridge between those ideas for a long time. I pulled into the driveway and sat there with the engine running, heat blowing, watching my breath fog the windshield. Inside, I took out a yellow legal pad and wrote a short list. Names, dates, documents, no threats, no plans, just awareness. I folded the paper and slid it back into the contingencies folder. That evening, Diane texted again. Can we talk tomorrow? I typed a reply, deleted it, typed another, deleted that too. In the end, I sent nothing. Because stepping back doesn't look dramatic. It looks like routine. And routine, I was learning, can change everything. By late morning, the first crack showed. It came quietly, the way real problems usually do, not with shouting, not with sirens, but with an email no one expected and no one could explain away. I was in the garage sorting through a box of old extension cords when my phone buzzed on the workbench. I wiped my hands on a rag and glanced at the screen. Diane, do you know anything about this? Attached was a screenshot. An email from a local event planner. Polite, apologetic, firm. We're unable to move forward without updated authorization. Please contact us once all documentation is current. I stared at the words for a long second, then set the phone face down again. I hadn't contacted anyone. I hadn't warned Diane. I hadn't said a word to the planner. All I'd done was stop being the safety net. That's the part people don't understand about systems. They assume someone has to sabotage them for things to fall apart. They don't see how much of life runs on quiet confirmations, renewals, references, signatures that get taken for granted. Diane called 5 minutes later. I let it ring. The vibration echoed through the garage, bouncing off concrete and old tools. When it stopped, the silence felt thicker than before. 10 minutes after that, another buzz. This time it was Sean. I didn't answer that one either. Instead, I went inside and poured myself another cup of coffee. The clock over the stove read 11:42 a.m. Same clock that had been there since before Diane moved in. Same ticking sound, steady and unbothered. At noon, sharp, my phone lit up again. Voicemail from Sean. I didn't listen to it right away. I knew the tone without hearing the words. By early afternoon, things started picking up speed. Another text from Diane. The caterer says the deposit didn't clear. A few minutes later. Sean's bank is asking for paperwork. Then another. Can you please just tell me what's going on? I sat at the kitchen table with the phone in my hand and thought about Caleb. I saw him at 16, gripping the steering wheel, two tight knuckles white as we eased onto the river road. I remembered telling him, easy. The truck will tell you what it needs if you listen. He'd laughed, nervous but proud, when he made it back without stalling. He didn't deserve to be collateral damage. That thought hit me hard enough that I almost picked up the phone. Almost. Then I reminded myself of something I'd learned a long time ago. You don't teach responsibility by absorbing consequences for other people. I set the phone down. An hour later, I finally listened to Sean's voicemail. Gary, man, I don't know what's happening, he said, breathless. They're saying the loan review is, this is routine stuff, right? You've always handled this. Call me back. Always handled this. That was the phrase that stuck. At 3:30, Rita Henson called again. Gary? She said, her voice still calm but careful now. We've got a renewal issue on the Mercer file. Your guarantor confirmation is overdue. I'm aware, I said. A pause. Not awkward. Respectful. Are you planning to renew? She asked. I looked out the window at the driveway at my truck sitting there clean and still. No, I said. I'm not. She didn't argue. She didn't ask why. Rita had been in finance long enough to know when a man had made up his mind. All right, she said. Then we'll proceed accordingly. Proceed accordingly. Another quiet phrase that carries weight. When the call ended, I sat there longer than necessary. My chest felt tight, not with excitement, but with something closer to grief. That evening, Diane showed up at the house. I heard her car before I saw it, the familiar rattle as she pulled into the driveway. The front door opened and closed harder than usual. Gary, she called. I stayed seated at the table. She came into the kitchen with her phone in her hand, eyes wide, voice sharp with panic. Everything is falling apart, she said. Sean's job is asking for updated references. The bank froze the account. The event. Gary, what did you do? I met her eyes. I didn't do anything, I said. She stared at me like I'd slapped her. That's not funny. I'm not joking. She took a step closer. Then why is this happening? I thought about the chair being slid in at the restaurant, about her saying family only like it was nothing. Because I said evenly, I stopped doing things. Her mouth opened, closed. She didn't have an answer for that. Caleb is scared, she said finally. He doesn't understand. Neither did she. Annie won't talk about finances in front of him, I said, and I won't lie to cover for anyone. She looked at me like she was seeing a stranger. Maybe she was. That night after she left, I sat alone again. Same house, same chair, different weight in the room. The next morning, the final piece clicked into place. Another voicemail from Rita. Gary, just to confirm without your renewal, the Mercer loan enters review immediately. Review, not punishment, not revenge, just process. I listened to the message twice, then deleted it. Outside, the Illinois River kept moving gray and patient, and somewhere across town, doors that had always opened for Sean Mercer began to close. Not because I slammed them, but because I was no longer standing in the doorway holding them open. The first time Sean really understood something was wrong, it wasn't in an office or over the phone. It was at a gas pump. I was at the Casey's on Knoxville Avenue, the one with the flickering light over Pump 3 and the coffee that always tasted faintly burned. Late afternoon. Cold enough that your breath showed if you stood still too long. I'd just started fueling up when I heard my name. Gary. I turned. Sean Mercer was striding across the lot jacket, unzipped, hair damp with sweat like he'd been running. His car was parked crooked behind mine fuel light, glowing like a warning he'd ignored too long. He stopped a few feet away, chest-heaving eyes wild. What did you do? He demanded. I looked back at the pump, watched the numbers roll. The smell of gasoline hung in the air. I filled up, I said. Same as you're about to. He stepped closer. Don't play dumb. The bank, my job. Everything's locked up. You did something. I shut the pump off and set the nozzle back. Slow, careful. Then I turned to face him. I didn't do anything, I said. I stopped doing things. He laughed sharp and hollow. That's the same thing. No, I said. It isn't. He ran a hand through his hair, pacing now like a man looking for an exit that wasn't there. You can't just pull this, he said. You've always handled this stuff. That word again. Handled. I leaned against my truck, felt the cold metal through my jacket. That's the problem, Sean, I said. I handled it. You got used to leaning. His face reddened. Diane said you were upset about the dinner, he said. This is about that, isn't it? Thought of Diane's smile under the restaurant lights, of the chair sliding in, of the way she hadn't even looked up. This didn't start at dinner, I said. That just made it clear. He stopped pacing and stared at me. So what, he snapped. This is revenge. I shook my head. No, I said. This is gravity, he scoffed. You think you're better than me? I think I said carefully that I warned you and Diane years ago. He opened his mouth to interrupt, but I kept going. I didn't break the bridge, Sean. I just stopped being the one holding it up. For a moment, the only sound was a truck pulling in behind us and the wind rattling a loose sign on the building. His shoulders sagged. Not all the way. Just enough. You're ruining my life, he said. I met his eyes. I protected it longer than I should have. He stared at me, searching for anger, for satisfaction. There wasn't any, just resolve. "You think you can just walk away?" he said. "I already have," I replied. He stood there another second, then turned and walked back to his car. The fuel pump clicked uselessly when he tried to start it empty. He swore under his breath and went inside. I got in my truck and pulled away. That night, Diane came over again. She didn't knock. She let herself in like she always had, but the confidence was gone. She looked smaller somehow, like the house had shifted around her. "You embarrassed him," she said. I answered a question, I replied. She paced the living room, hands clenched. "People are talking. They always do." She stopped and faced me. "You warned us about what." I took a breath. This was the part that mattered. "About confusing convenience with respect," I said. "About leaning on someone so long you forget they're holding you up." Her eyes filled, but she didn't cry yet. "We're family," she said. "You said we weren't," I reminded her. "At least not enough." Silence settled between us, heavy, honest. I saw it then, the moment she realized this wasn't a tantrum. This wasn't a phase. This was structural. And structures don't bend just because you regret standing on the wrong side of them. "I didn't think you'd actually stop," she said quietly. "I didn't think you'd ask me to leave," I answered. She sat down like her legs had finally given out. "What happens now?" she asked. I looked at the wall where our wedding photo used to hang. We'd taken it down years ago, telling ourselves we'd replace it. "Now," I said, "things stand on their own." She covered her face with her hands. I felt something twist in my chest. Not satisfaction, loss. But it was clean loss, the kind that doesn't rot. When she left, the house felt different. Not emptier, clearer. The next morning, a message came in from Rita, just confirming without renewal the Mercer account enters full review today. I replied with a single word: confirmed. That's when I understood something I should have learned earlier. In a town like this, your name carries weight long before your voice does. And when you stop lending it out, people finally feel how heavy it was. The room went quiet before anyone realized it had. That's how those places are church halls, community rooms. The noise doesn't stop all at once. It thins. Laughter fades into murmurs. Chairs scrape softer. Then suddenly you notice you can hear the hum of the lights. This one was St. Mark's Community Hall, just off Willow Knolls. Folding chairs, beige walls, cheap white string lights draped along the far wall like someone had tried to make it feel festive without trying too hard. A long table held a sheet cake with blue frosting, Caleb's name written too big in the middle. "Happy 18th, Caleb." I stood near the back, hands in my pockets, jacket still on. I hadn't planned on coming, but Rita had mentioned the hall earlier that day, and right after that, Walt Brannigan had called. "You should show your face," Walt said. "Doesn't hurt to remind folks you're still you." Walt's a retired machinist. VFW Post 2600, the kind of man people listen to without knowing why. If he said it mattered, I believed him. I didn't make an entrance. I never do. Sean was near the front, already flushed, one arm draped around Caleb's shoulders like a claim. Diane hovered, close eyes darting every time the door opened. She saw me before Sean did. Her face changed. Not shock, not anger, relief mixed with fear, like she'd been hoping I'd come and dreading it at the same time. People started whispering, not loudly, just enough. "Is that Gary Whitaker? I heard something about the loan. Didn't the credit union freeze something?" A chair scraped behind me. Someone coughed. Ice clinked in a plastic cup. Then Rita crossed the room. She didn't look at Sean. She came straight to me and stuck out her hand. "Gary," she said. "Good to see you." "Good to see you, Rita," I replied. Behind her, Walt appeared, coffee in one hand, nodding like this was exactly where things were supposed to be. "Evening, Gary. Evening, Walt." They stood with me for a moment, casual, unremarkable, but the message landed anyway. In a town like Peoria, people notice who stands where. Sean noticed too. He stepped away from the table and made his way over, jaw-tight smile plastered on like it had been glued there. "Hey, Gary," he said too loud. "Didn't expect to see you." "I was in the neighborhood," I said. Caleb slipped out from under Sean's arm and walked toward me. He looked taller than the last time I'd really seen him. Thinner too. Older in the eyes. "Gary," he said. "What's going on?" The room leaned in without moving. I bent slightly so we were eye level. Not tonight, I said quietly. Tonight's about you. Happy birthday. He nodded, but the confusion didn't leave his face. Diane stepped forward then. She didn't mean to speak loudly, but fear has a way of pushing words out. Why are you doing this to us? She asked. Every head turned. Sean shot her a look, but it was too late. The question hung there raw and public. I straightened. I didn't do anything I said evenly. I stopped covering things up. A ripple moved through the room. Not gasps, recognition. Sean laughed sharp and forced. You hear this? He thinks Walt cleared his throat. Son, he said, not unkindly. You might want to sit down. That did it. Sean's face went red. He turned back toward the table, grabbed a plastic cup, raised it halfway. Let's just do a toast, he said, for Caleb. No one lifted their cup. The silence that followed wasn't angry. It was uncomfortable, heavy. The kind that tells you the story everyone's been hearing, just changed chapters. Sean lowered the cup. Diane stared at the floor. Caleb looked at me once more, searching. I gave him a small nod, not approval, reassurance. I stayed another minute, long enough for the point to settle. Then I slipped out the same way I came in. No door slam, no speech, just absence. Behind me, the hum of the lights kept going. The cake sat untouched. The toast died in the air. They cornered me 2 nights later. Not at my house, not in a parking lot, somewhere more careful. The conference room at the credit union sat on the 2nd floor past a hallway that always smelled faintly like carpet cleaner and burnt coffee, folding chairs against one wall, a long table scarred with old pen marks. The kind of room where people don't raise their voices because everything echoes. Rita was already there when I walked in. She nodded once and stepped aside. Diane and Sean were seated across from each other, not together. That alone told me how bad things had gotten. Sean looked like he hadn't shaved in days. Jacket open, shirt wrinkled. Diane sat straight, her hands folded tight in her lap, eyes red but dry. Rita closed the door. Thank you for coming, she said. This won't take long. Sean didn't wait. What the hell is this? He snapped. Why am I here? Rita stayed calm. Because the Mercer loan is under full review, she said. And because Mr. Whitaker is the guarantor. Sean turned to me. You did this. I shook my head. No, I said. I stopped preventing it. Diane finally spoke. Her voice was smaller than I remembered. Gary. She asked, who are you really? The room went still. Not accusatory, not dramatic, just a question that had been waiting years to be asked. I reached into my jacket and set a manila folder on the table. I didn't slide it. I just placed it there and opened it. Inside were copies. Clean, organized, dates highlighted. This, I said, tapping the first page, is what my name's been doing. I pointed to the next page, then the next. Sean stared at the papers like they might bite him. You didn't have to do all that he said. No, I replied. I chose to. Diane swallowed. Why? That was the real question. I stayed, I said, because I thought being steady mattered more than being respected. I looked at Sean. I protected you because I was told that's what family does. Then I looked at Diane, and I stayed longer than I should have because of Caleb. Her breath hitched. I was ready to leave 3 years ago, I said. I didn't. I waited until he was 18, until he could stand on his own without me quietly propping everything up. Sean shot to his feet. So this is some kind of punishment? No, I said. It's an ending. Rita cleared her throat. Without Mr. Whitaker's renewal, she said the loan enters default review. That process has already begun. Sean slammed his hand on the table. This is unbelievable. Diane stood slowly, tears finally spilling. You could have said something, she said. I did, I answered. Years ago. You laughed. Silence stretched between us. Sean paced hands in his hair. You're enjoying this, he said. I met his eyes. I'm relieved. That seemed to break him more than anger ever could. Rita gathered the papers. We'll proceed according to policy, she said, opening the door. Sean stormed out first, muttering under his breath. Diane lingered. I didn't think you'd actually leave, she said quietly. I didn't think you'd ask me to, I replied. I reached into my jacket one last time and set another envelope on the table. What's that, she asked. Separation papers, I said. Fair, clean, no surprises. Her hands shook as she touched the edge of the envelope. I'm sorry, she whispered. I nodded once. I know. Then I walked out. The river was gray that morning, the way it gets in late fall, moving slow but steady past the bend south of town. I'd been sitting there a while on a cold bench, a paper cup of coffee warming my hands. Same stretch of water where I'd once taught Caleb to skip stones. Same wind off the surface, sharp enough to remind you you're still alive. I'd moved into a small condo a few weeks earlier. Nothing fancy. One bedroom, clean lines, quiet, the kind of place that doesn't pretend to be more than it is. I liked that. The first few nights the silence felt strange, not heavy, just unfamiliar. Then it settled into something I hadn't felt in years, peace without tension underneath it. People in town stopped me now and then. At Casey's, at the hardware store, a nod, a handshake. Someone would say they were sorry how things turned out. Someone else would say I handled it right. I didn't correct them. I didn't explain. Stories travel faster than truth in small places, but the end of this one didn't need defending. Diane signed the papers without fighting them. Clean, fair. She didn't call after that. I think she finally understood that some doors don't slam. They close quietly and stay that way. Sean moved out of town not long after. Last I heard, he was staying with a cousin downstate trying to reset. I wished him no harm. I also didn't miss him. The message from Caleb came on a Tuesday evening just as the sun was dropping low over the water. I get it now. I'm sorry. Thank you for staying as long as you did. I read it twice, then once more. My chest tightened, but this time it wasn't pain. It was something closer to pride. Not the loud kind, the earned kind. I typed back a short reply. You don't owe me anything. Take care of yourself. That was enough. I watched the river a while longer, thinking about names and weight and the things men carry without ever talking about them. How you can spend decades building something solid only to have it tested by one careless sentence. Family only. Those words had taken more than they ever realized, but they'd also given something back. Clarity. Here's what I learned. Real strength doesn't shout, real power doesn't humiliate, and respect isn't something you demand. It's something you protect even when it costs you. I didn't win. I didn't lose. I walked away clean with my name intact, and sometimes that's the only ending that matters. If this story hit close to home, if you've ever felt invisible at your own table, remember this. You're not wrong for stepping back. Quiet strength still counts. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. And if you want more stories like this, real, grounded, and earned, take a moment to subscribe. Thank you for listening.